Hey everybody, Jared Jones. Just want to cover some of the real estate topics of the day. Today I've got with me my partner in crime. Hopefully not too much crime. We stay on this side of the bars. Joshue Merizalde. What's up, Joshue? How are you today?
What's up, everybody? It's good to be with you. Excited to talk about the market.
Josue, actually, you had your you had your first seven-figure sale, right? In the last 6 months or so?
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I think it's 1.1 million paid cash.
And I know some parts of the country that's like so
Like,
it's an entry home, but in Florida it's well into the luxury market. So Josue was representing someone in the actually I should say the seven-figure range. Was it far removed from a regular priced home?
um, I mean, in Windermere, it was in Windermere. So Windermere is pretty small. It's a luxury. It's a lot of water, low inventory, high demand. So I
Was it
mean, I guess
hard to represent the sale though? Was it way different than $500,000? Were the clients like,
no,
oh, they like a handful?
it's actually
Challenge?
not. They're actually super friendly. Yeah, it was nice. They were coming from Texas. Very humble family. Really, really nice people. It was great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to have you on, man. So let's cover a few topics that I wanted to get with you on. So there's a few items to discuss. I would tell you that the headline of today seems that more resources and more energy is going into rental markets right now. There's a lot of buzz in the residential market because technology companies are making big plays. They're purchasing companies that real estate brokerages would never purchase. And we'll start the news with a major, I think one of the top real estate online brands, which is a company called Redfin. And this company is out of Washington. They bought a company called RentPath for $608 million. And RentPath is like a rental search site. They basically index results. So you can go on the consumer side, rent.com is one of their companies. I think apartmentguide.com is another one where you can actually go online and you can shop for rentals. And so interestingly enough, they paid $608 million,
Nice.
Redfin did, to expand their brand. And so I think this basically speaks to the fact that there's a lot of gridlock in the marketplace in the actual brokerage side when you're talking about buyers and sellers transacting business together. And one of the interesting things is in what this tells us is that in the world of those that know that are in business for the future of residential real estate, that there's huge plays for investment real estate. There's huge plays in rental market growth, and that's kind of what it looks like to me. I don't know. What did you think about that, Josue?
Yeah, it's a big market, and it's there right now. You got all these offshoot areas that you can market a home. You got Zillow, but you got Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. You just got all these different apartments.com is a big one too. So it's smart. 1 in 3 households are rented in the United States, so it's a big market for them. It's not just real estate. It's the rental market's pretty big in the United States.
It is interesting. It is interesting, and I think that unfortunately, that many buyers, if they're watching this, are probably just saying that it's so difficult to get in.
Yeah.
The competition is fierce in the marketplace right now, which is unbelievable. I was even reading that places like New York, which New York City has been in terrible shape since COVID.
Yeah.
Urban areas have been having what's called urban flight. So they flap their arms and they leave the city as fast as they can. And so in that case, even New York City has turned around. They had record sales in January over 2020. So, but one of the things that we're seeing, we were scanning the news, and Josue, it seems like there's a lot of discussion when you look at the winners and losers, and focusing in on the fact there's so much talk about investing and rental property ownership and the ability for renters to get properties. It seems like the news is really lined up between private rental opportunity and public rental options. And it seems like there's actually a lot of, chips coming to play. And so, what do you think about, what do you think about what's going on in the marketplace for the mom and pop? A guy like you're trying to get into the market and buy rental property yourself. What are the concerns, or what are the, what are the things that you're focused on, with what's going on in the U.S. economy right now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess, eviction's a big one. You got these kind of liberal, not just cities but states that makes it really hard to evict somebody. 60, 90 days, or if they don't pay, you have to give them all this time, and you have to take them to court. And it's a big deal. You're kicking somebody out of their home, but from the investment side, that it kind of hurts your business when you have 1, 2 rentals. It's not like you're really stacking up a ton of money every month. And you're providing a service, you're providing a place to live, you want that return. And investors are kind of getting nervous that some of this kind of liberal thinking where the landlord's the bad guy, instead of somebody who's actually giving somebody a home to live in for a price they're willing to pay. The laws may make it harder for landlords, even small ones like me, to be able to afford having a renter in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so Time did an article today that I looked at that said millions of tenants are behind on rent and small landlords are struggling. So to your point, I think there are probably people that are short-sighted that look at one of the two people as villains, right? There's some people that look and say, man, this tenant could be making the rent and they're not making the rent, and they're the bad guy. And then you have people that look at the landlord and they're like, well, the tenant can't afford to pay the landlord, so the landlord should figure out how to pay their own mortgage, even though the money's not coming in. And so I don't know. I think when, taking a look at this article, it's really glaring that the struggles are upon everybody, especially in the private side of the market. Look at this. It says millions of tenants are behind on rent. Small landlords are struggling. Eviction moratoriums expiring soon inside the next crisis. And in Seattle, this article was written by Avi Vasilis and with Time Magazine. She said that this talks about this lady who her mom got a cancer diagnosis. Her dad had undergone major surgery. She was laid off from a biotech startup. And then she has a mortgage on her home, but also she owns a bungalow in a Seattle neighborhood that was an investment property. And the only way, so now the tenant has fallen behind, and she can't evict the tenant because of the moratoriums there in Seattle, which exist all over the country. And so the monthly rent is backing up. And by Thanksgiving, he owed more than $20,000 in lease payments to the landlord.
Wow.
And the state and national eviction moratoriums prevented Delat from kicking the renter out amid the pandemic. Yet she couldn't float the tenant. She just couldn't. She's like, I can't. After months of anxiety, she was going to use a loophole, and the loophole to force the person out. The only way that you can actually get the person out of the property is move back in it. You actually have to move back in your investment property. And then apparently with this situation, the person, I guess, decided not to kick the tenant out. And then the story was about how that took place. And you've got a lot of these really sad stories where, we've decided that we're really going to shutter our economy. We've picked the economy to basically take a wrecking ball to it. And we've levied up personal health, and we've created certain silos of essential workers. And there's been businesses and supply chains that are absolutely getting decimated. There's, I recently read that in New York, 90% of restaurants cannot make the rent payments. And so here in these private situations, you have private mortgage people, private owners that have their own mortgages, and tenants aren't paying the bill. And what is really intriguing to me is that I don't feel like we've seen these houses hit the market yet. So in Florida, I think we actually really insulated ourselves more than most states from putting too many regulations in place that really made our, that were basically dams of prevention from the actual market playing itself out. So I feel like we're in a different position probably than most places. But I don't know, man. It's just really sad to see what's going to happen. And it says the eviction moratoriums are expiring soon in many of these states in March. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you think that we're going to be extending the eviction notices, or will they stay? What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, and it's so complex because you feel for both. I mean, a lot of these properties, I mean, they're still under a loan, so it doesn't just it's not just money that's profit. You're paying out, but these people still have a mortgage to keep up themselves, and it's tough. It's tough on both parties. I mean, I don't know. I think the moratoriums need to end. Just personally, I think the lockdowns need to be lifted. I think people getting back to work and not having, it. I don't think the pandemic's causing it. I think bad regulation is causing it. I think that's the real disease in our culture right now. To be honest, businesses need to open. People need to be able to work for a living, and we can't just keep printing out money and giving it away. You can't do that. So
I don't think any of this is about giving things away. I think it's about letting people work.
yeah.
I mean, if you don't let them work, they're not gonna have money.
Yeah.
It's really, go ahead.
Yeah, via stimulus, it's like we're printing money. I mean, what is like a $600 or $1,200 payment look for somebody who's been not able to work since March last year? It's like you give me 600. It's almost an insult, to somebody who wants to get back to their work but can't. Whether they're in the restaurant business or or airports are hit hard, hotels, theme parks.
Yeah. Yeah. So check this out. So more about that. The Jacobin, which I believe is probably a blog or a mainstream paper out of California, is now talking about social housing. So we're still in the same sector of providing options for people who need to rent property, but they have this layout of this idea of cover art for California Housing Corporation, the case for a public sector developer. And they write that slowly but surely the idea of social housing, which is a public housing model most commonly associated with the socialist government of Red Vienna, is moving from being a leftist dream to concrete policy agenda in a number of US states. And they talk about how there was a bill introduced this month in California, which would lay the foundation for publicly developed and owned housing for people of all incomes, which is social housing. Okay. And if it passes, it will mark a monumental shift in the state's housing system. And this comes at a time when the housing market, dominated by private sector for-profit interest, has failed Californians. More than 2 million California households reported little to no confidence in their ability to cover the rent, suggests 10 million American households are behind, which is so funny. Like the article says that because there's no way that people can make their rent because they can't afford to live there, that the private sector has failed them, right? So that's so comical because you have the cost you have because you have expenses created that are then levied on the owner, okay? So for instance, in California, they have stringent zoning rules which cause them to be able to build nowhere. Like you have a shortage of housing, so then you have inflation, you have a population that exceeds the amount of places that people can actually live in, driving prices through the roof. So then your mortgage is really high, which means your rent's gonna be high to cover a mortgage of that amount. And then property taxes follow suit. You have super high taxation. And then they say to the private guy, well, the private guy can't afford to operate in this highly inflated environment and provide the utopian rental fees that we need for where the occupant that lives in California needs his payment to be. So then you can actually create it from government. So presto, you can have government come in and you can insulate government from all the market forces that actually increase the price of all this stuff. And then say, well, now we've got it covered, okay? Which this is the really sad part, is what happens is you create massive socialist policies that create chaos in the economy. And then the correction is you weed out and basically remove private economy from existence in that area and from this particular state, obviously many other states. I'm sure I can guess the other states that this is coming because it's the same craziness that created it. And And then, you have socialized housing. And so, and that's scary, man. Like, people don't really want the government to manage their housing. It's the whole concept of the DMV. If anybody wants to experience what their government controlled housing is like, is go spend the afternoon getting your license renewed, right? That is the same situation. You do not want that. Government is not efficient. Socialism is an insulation of private market, and private market has its advantages because it actually promotes things that are beneficial, and things that are not, that don't have economy behind them, get weeded out and they are passed over. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think about all this?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But I just I have a friend who works at the VA, and it's the same thing. It's people want socialized everything. Socialized healthcare is big in the news, hot button topic. But I jokingly said that the VA has probably killed more people than it's saved, because the VA is notoriously bad, because it's run by the government, right? I mean, and it's funny, but like when somebody breaks something, when somebody needs major surgery and they're on base and in need of actual like professional medical care, they get sent to a local hospital in town. So that's kind of like a good kind of microcosm of what, socialism versus capitalism is that if you want something done right, you need competition. You need to have the ability to go somewhere else, take your business, take your money somewhere else, and you need to have these companies compete with each other. If you have socialized living, where are you going to go when that fails? Where are you going to go?
Or what if the government doesn't like you?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
like what happens if you're just, that's the common thing right now, is that the government gets to decide who's essential.
Yeah.
You get blessed to work because the government said so. That's the danger. And I think that what we're having happen right now as a fallout effect of the pandemic and how it was governed over is that we picked winners and losers, this is the way government ruins economies. And what's happening is you're having, this is the combined blend of government with a capitalist and a socialist approach at the same time, is that private government or private economy can't survive with a blanket of social policy and socialized adaptation on top of it. You stifle it out, and then you go, oh, the remedy is all socialistic.
Yeah.
And so essentially that's the trail. That's the plan we're seeing. And it's, it's kind of sketchy, man, when that's the leading thought. And Biden, it does not surprise me at all. I'm not being partisan or political here, but in the Biden plan, Biden brought up in his plan a ton of government intervention in the rental sector. In fact, I'll share something that I saw that came out of Hillsborough County, recently, maybe in the last week, that one of the county commissioners in the Tampa area, which is where Hillsborough County is, basically said that there's this new problem that landlords are discriminating against tenants who pay with vouchers. Okay. So county leaders in Hillsborough said that there's discrimination from landlords from Section 8 recipients, which I don't know about you. I've had a lot of people that I've talked to that rent to Section 8, and they're like, Section 8's guaranteed money. Like, I'm taking Section 8 all day because that is the most reliable form of payment. And so this says the county leaders are now working to pass a, quote, renter's bill of rights, which is exactly what the Biden plan had from the federal level. Clyburn he's out of California. I'm sorry, not California, Carolina. Clyburn wrote a lot of the aspects of the Biden policy. There's the Green New Deal stuff, but in the housing, Clyburn was very much involved, which is going to prohibit landlords from policing financial resources. Which, think about this. If landlords can't pick who they want to rent based on financial capacity, to me, this just tells us that the government thinks that a lot more people are going to need socialized money to have a place to live. So that the government is going to be heavily involved in the ability for renters to even have homes. That to me is what the play is here. It's like, we have to watch out to make sure that everybody can take vouchers, because we can't have any competition with us. Like, we cannot have a private market competing with us, because we're going to put a whole lot of people in a position where they need to rent, and they're going to need government money to make it happen. And I mean, that's the way the Biden plan looked. What's interesting is this is straight out of the playbook of the Biden plan. This whole idea of renter bill of rights and all that, and it's coming from the commissioner level in a city in Florida.
That's pretty crazy.
Well, times are changing, everybody, and we'd love to hear the conversation continued on in the comments below. What do you think? Is the private market coming to a disastrous end? I definitely think it's in the headwinds, because I believe that we have people in charge that are not really confidants of the private options. I think they want more public options. And so that's the news of the day. I mean, I wish we were talking more from headlines of buying and selling homes, but it's eviction central, it's renters, and that's where the playmakers are right now. So I have a feeling, Josue, that home ownership's it's gonna get anemic. I mean, I think it could see some change.
Buying or selling a home in Central Florida is expensive. The Jones Group leverages the latest technology and passes the savings on to you. List your home for just 1%. Buying a home, get $7,000 cash rebate before close. Make one call, that's all. Better service, lower fees.